Hello, good morning, afternoon, depending on where you're located, and welcome to the Extranet User Manager webinar on publishing Office 365 websites to external users with Azure. My name is Peter Carson. I'm going to be your presenter for the next hour or so, also the president of Extranet User Manager, SharePoint MVP, and partner seller with Microsoft Canada. All my details are up on the slide here. We're going to be sharing a copy of the slide deck after the event as well, so you can always pull that down and get all my details. I want to start with a quick introduction on Extranet User Manager as well. For those of you that are not familiar with our product line, we've been around for quite a number of years. Started as a bespoke solution that was custom built for a number of clients, won some awards around that, had about half a dozen different clients using it, and decided, you know what, this is becoming popular, we should productize this. And about 5 years ago, we went through a process of productizing the code base, building an installer, and really creating what is now Extranet User Manager. It's gone through a couple of iterations and major versions since then. Back in 2014, we added Office 365 support. So that was a major technology change under the hood for us to support that. 2015, we launched out our own brand for Extranet User Manager. We added Azure B2B support last year and launched our channel partner program out this year. We're also just launching out our version 4 of our Extranet User Manager, which is what I'm going to be demonstrating for us today. Customers around the globe. Yes, we've got customers here in Canada where we're located, in the US, Europe, Australia, Asia as well. So what I'd like to do now, once we've got through the intros there, and just start with a little bit of background. I want to clarify a couple of terms that we're going to be using through here. We're talking about publishing our Office 365 site to Azure, and what does that really mean? It may mean that what we want to do is create a public-facing website. So this is an anonymously available website. Potentially has a large number of users that are going to be visiting it. Now, SharePoint provides a rich content management system for authoring the site. It could be used for delivering the content, and we've got many legacy clients that we've actually published out their SharePoint environment as their public-facing website. We're going to talk about some of the advantages, disadvantages of that, and a hybrid solution is going to be the focus here today of using SharePoint from a content management point of view, but using an Azure website instead of SharePoint for actually delivering that content. Now, in addition to being a public website, could also be an extranet that we're discussing here, which is still a website. It's accessible to people outside your organization, but it is secure. It does require, some sort of authentication, typically a username and password, or maybe federation with another system like a Google login or a Facebook login in order to access that content. And it could be part of your public website, could just be an extension of that. It could be a secure portion of your corporate intranet, or it could be a purpose-built standalone extranet. The examples that we're going to talk about today are primarily the first one, where they're both a public-facing website and an extranet, kind of all wrapped up into one. So when we look at extranets, we kind of categorize them into two broad buckets. There's what we call collaborative and publishing extranets. So a collaborative extranet, often you see this in SharePoint Online or on premises, where you want to invite people in. Rather than emailing documents back and forth, from a collaboration point of view, it'd be much more effective if you had a single version of the truth, where you could do the file upload, download, do the editing, support all the various different file types. And we often see this in project focus. Maybe you're working with your legal counsel, or you're an engineering firm that's trading drawings and documents back and forth. You've got a partner or a customer that you're collaborating on. The scenarios are endless for that collaborative scenario. The other one is publishing. Still a secure website, may have a public anonymous section to it, but it's often a self-registration scenario. You don't typically know everybody who's going to be coming in there. You want to basically market and advertise it, get them to register. Maybe you go through an approval process, maybe not, and have a secure way of pushing that private content out. You need to know who's accessing that content, and you may need some approvals around them before they're allowed to access that. But it's fairly limited feedback. It's primarily a one-way push of content out. Maybe you've got things like and comment, or the ability to upload files, but it's not like you're actually collaborating and editing together on documents through there. There is often a profile management piece to this as well, which often ties into the public website as well. Maybe you've got e-newsletters or different services that you need to sign up for. That can all be managed as part of the authenticated profile as well. So those are sort of the two main styles of extranets. Now, I mentioned the collaborative style. We often see that in Office 365. It's Office 365 is just focused on delivering intranets and extranets. There's no public websites available up in SharePoint Online. But you can use features like external sharing out of the box in Office 365 to create your own extranet. within that. And we can build on top of that. We can really enhance that experience if your extranet is getting larger scale, where maybe instead of just tens of external users, you've got hundreds or thousands or even hundreds of thousands of external users. You need some more governance and structure around that. And that's really what our product is all about. And on our previous webinar, this is the third in the trilogy that we're doing here today, is all about this scenario of Office 365 external sharing. So if you want to see more about that, I encourage you to go back in our archive. All the recording and decks are there for those past webinars as well. The one we're going to focus on here, though, is the Azure Websites idea. And the idea here is that it's a very cost-effective way to host your website. It can be as little as $100 a month if you're not worried about high availability. Typically, we recommend having at least two servers running in Azure running your website. So that would take it up to anywhere from sort of $200 to $400 a month, depending on the size of those servers. And you can scale that much larger. The beauty of Azure is it's very elastic. If you say, you know what, I'm a retailer and you know what, December's around the door, and we're going to be having a lot more traffic on our website, you could scale that up extremely large and support massive volumes. Maybe you're a municipal organization and election time is coming, and you want to make sure that on election day you've got the scale there. You can literally rent it by the hour and say, you know what, for the next 24, 48 hours, we need to 10 times size our infrastructure, and then we can just scale it right back down again, and we only pay for what we need through there. But the thing to remember is an Azure website is just a place to host a website that you build. There's no content management system there. There's no structure for you to be able to author up that content. It's really a technical solution. Now, Microsoft does a very good job of taking care of the technical side of it. You don't need to patch servers. You don't need to make sure that they're up. Microsoft leverages all of that. It's called Platform as a Service, where they manage the platform for you. And what we're suggesting is saying, okay, well, why don't we leverage Office 365 or SharePoint on-premises for the content management? Because SharePoint is a great CMS tool. We'll go deeper into what that looks. You've got the ability for WYSIWYG editing, where people can edit, right in the browser and see what the content is going to look like. There's approval processes, so if it needs to go through workflows before it gets published out, that can all be managed as part of that as well. And that's all out-of-the-box functionality in SharePoint. And then we can take the published content and push it up onto that Azure website. And that's really what we're going to focus on here today. So for these extranets, whether they're collaboration scenarios or publishing scenarios, there's a very broad set of potential extranet users that are going to be coming into that. It could be a members portal. Maybe you're a not-for-profit or a charitable organization. You've got donors, volunteers that need to come in with that. You're a for-profit. You've got customers, your vendors, your suppliers that you're working with. You need to collaborate with or publish out to, depending on your scenario. Board of directors is an often common scenario from an extranet point of view. Citizens, maybe you're a government organization and you need to provide a citizen-facing portal. Researchers, maybe educational, tenants, partners, so lots of different examples. And this is really one of the first things that we ask when we're talking to an organization about building an extranet is, well, who's going to be coming into it? Which of those categories do they fit into? And maybe longer term, several of those categories are going to fit in. Maybe you want to start with a supplier portal and then build a customer portal and build it out from there. It really depends on your business requirements as to who's going to be coming in. And then does everyone see the same information? Is there a need for different security groups? This is a customer portal. Maybe you want to publish out customer invoices or orders or things like that. Obviously, customer A shouldn't see customer B's information through there. So we need to understand what's the security rules and how's this going to hang together. Also, is there some sort of member database that we need to interface with? Are you running Salesforce or Dynamics CRM? And we can keep the profiles in sync for that. So as people sign in, their member profile in your backend system is up to date as well. Is it invitation only, or can people self-register? And like I mentioned before, often this correlates with, is it a collaborative site where we want to invite specific people in, or is it more of a publishing site where generally anybody can discover it, self-register, but often has to go through some sort of approval process as part of that. And then is it just the extranet that we're going to be building that they're going to be accessing, or are there other systems? Do we need to provide access into an SAP portal or other back-end systems? Desire to Learn is one example we've done where they need to deliver online learning as part of the extranet. So what I'd like to do now is make it a little more real for you and dive into a customer case study. We did a full-on case study webinar this past summer on Ontario MD, so I'm not going to go as deep as that, but it's a great example to give you a sense of what we're talking about here. So a little background on who Ontario MD is. They're a not-for-profit, government-funded here in Ontario, and really their audience is the 14,000 Ontario physicians and their staff, their nurses, administrative staff, etc. So they have a public-facing site, www.ontariomd.ca, and they realized, a little over a year ago, they put out an RFP tender saying, you know what, we need a new corporate website and a members portal. We need to reduce the cost of the current hosting, make it easy for the 14,000 physicians. Technology is not their first line of business. We want to make sure that they can get on and do the things that they need to very easily. We need a seamless migration of the content, the functionality, the user accounts, and they were looking for a hosted and managed solution. So if we look at the before and after of what that was like. So previously they were on a 10-year-old Oracle WCI platform. They were actually running Office 365 internally at the organization. And our proposal was, well, why don't we leverage SharePoint Online, which is part of Office 365, as the content management system for their new website. And then we can host it on Azure Web Apps from there. So that's much more cost effective in terms of hosting around that. So what does that actually mean from a dollars and cents point of view? So the new operating costs of not only us running the website on behalf of Ontario MD, but also providing a hosted version of our extranet user manager product that we'll get into as well. Those total operating costs were actually less than just the annual Oracle maintenance fees. That's a pretty big number. Never mind all of the infrastructure, the hosting fees that they were paying for that dedicated hosting environment, the staff they needed to have on board to manage that environment. So tremendous operating savings through the project. And at the end of the day, the infrastructure that we put in place was two standard S2 two-core servers. So these are servers that are managed by Microsoft. They're load balanced, they're patched and maintained by Microsoft. So all we're responsible for is paying that $220 times 2 per month for those two servers. Put our website up on there. Microsoft pretty much takes care of everything else from there. And we've got our extranet user manager license. That was $1,070 per month. We host that entire environment for them. That covers their license fees as well as all the hosting related to that. So net significant dollar savings from that point of view. So let's have a quick look at what that actually looks like. Let me come over to my browser here for a second, and I've pulled up the www.ontariomd.ca site. So this is the public site available to anybody. You can browse through here, have a look at what Ontario MD is all about, and you'll notice there's a lot of content in here. There's also a lot of roll-ups in here. So if I go into different sections, like let's say I want to go into my news, I can actually see all the historical news through the organization. One of the things that we like doing when we build these kinds of sites is automating these roll-up pages. So they don't need to manually maintain the news content on the roll-up page. They just post new news articles, tag them appropriately, and the roll-ups automatically happen from there. Likewise, if I come down into events, I can see my past and upcoming events and get all the details from that point of view. Again, this is all managed just through content types and metadata in SharePoint, and the roll-ups come up from there. Now, how does this actually work from a content author's point of view? I mentioned they were already an Office 365 customer, so I'm not going to take you into their live site. I'm going to use the dev site. We're not going to change anything. I just want to give you a quick look around at what's in here and how it hangs together. So the first thing to remember, this is a dev site, and I'm pointing you at the production site here, so the content's not going to match 100% back and forth between them, but the structure of the site is fundamentally the same. I'm on the home page of the live site here. I come to the home page in Office 365 SharePoint Online, and I can see it's very much the same style home page in here. Yes, I've got a little bit of ribbon at the top for Office 365. I've got the ability to edit pages and such through here. I wouldn't typically edit the home page. The home page we like to build so it's dynamically driven from all the various different content areas. But if I go down into one of these headlines, whoops, let me use a slightly different page here. I come into the company overview, and I can actually edit the content in through here. I'm going to show you a demo site a little bit later. We're going to go deeper into that process. And basically what happens is there is an approval process. So when content is ready to be published, it gets submitted to a workflow. Optionally, the business unit that's responsible for that part of the site gets notified and has to sign off on it. Then the communications team gets notified when they sign off. That gets marked as published in Office 365, and that's the trigger for us to move it up to the Azure website. And there's a scheduled job that runs every 5 minutes. It picks up those new published pages, documents, images, anything that's been put up in the SharePoint site, and it brings it across into the site here. So in terms of what that looks like, this is a bit of the infrastructure behind the scene. We see on the left-hand side here is the Office 365 where I was in as a content author working away. And then these arrows here represent the publishing process. So when the workflows are finished and all the approvals have happened in SharePoint, that content gets pushed across to that Azure website. Anonymous users can come in and browse that, but we can also sign in as an extranet user and see private content in there as well. There's a full search experience as part of that too. So if I come back to the public site for a minute, you notice up here there's the sign in and register links. I can click that sign in link. To register on the site, I do need to provide my OMA number, some private information. It goes through a validation process, so we won't go through the registration process, but effectively at the end of the day, I've got an email address and a password that I enter in here, and it allows me to log into the site. If I've forgotten my credentials, there's a forgotten password process that goes through that as well. So that's really the main structure of the site itself. Now, I want to focus a little deeper because we're talking about extranets here on the Extranet User Manager product itself. And we've touched on a couple of the features of that, but let's dive into a few more through there. So registration, I'm actually going to take you later through a full registration process and give you a sense of what that process looks like. But there is an out-of-the-box registration in the product. It's fully customizable. It's very easy to add fields to it, to change the workflow processes and approvals and such through that. There's also other end user components around setting your password, managing your profile, changing your password, and forgotten password. There's an admin portion to it as well. Now, admin is a bit of a misnomer because this is all about delegation as well, so we can delegate access to this tool out to the business owners themselves. In the case of Ontario MD, when a physician registers on the site, they have the ability to then invite other users within their staff. So they can invite their admin staff, they can invite their nursing staff in there. Typically what they do is they pick one admin staff, they make them what they call a sponsored account manager, and they're able to then invite other users in on behalf of that physician. So it's a very delegated model around how those external users get managed, and that's true in most of our implementations. So we've got the ability in here to search, add, edit, and import both users and groups, and we can configure the system as a whole. And we'll give you a tour a little later through the application itself. Branding is very important throughout the whole experience. We want to make sure that it's your brand that's being presented in there. So you're not going to see the Extranet User Manager brand in a custom deployment. This is an example for Kinross for their supplier portal. They've got about 6,000 suppliers around the world that are able to register on this portal, go through an approval process, designated an administrator within their organization, and then get onboarded and go through the supplier onboarding requirements at Kinross. All the pages are adaptive, so we leverage the Bootstrap framework. What that means is that whether you're working on a desktop computer, a tablet, a smartphone, you're going to get a rich experience that adapts across all those different environments. And again, I'll show you that as we go through. We've already mentioned the self-registration, fully customizable. This is one that we did for Public Health Ontario. You know, we can add fields, we can remove fields, we can change the approval process around that. And in our new version, V4 that we've got out, it's very easy to do those editing through just HTML editing of the form itself. Forgotten password is obviously something very important. You've got users who may come in infrequently, they don't remember their credentials. We've used their email address as their username, so hopefully they remember that. All they need to do is type that email address in. We'll send them an email with a one-time use time expiring token. They set their new password and they're able to log in again. So we never send passwords through email. It's clear text, it's not safe from that point of view. What we do is send those one-time use tokens through and allow them to choose their own password from there. Single sign-on, so if there are multiple systems that we're talking about here, you know, maybe they're coming into both the website and Office 365, maybe SharePoint on premises, maybe Desire to Learn, other portals, custom applications that you've built, you know, users sign in once, and as they move between the various different systems, they're automatically logged in. This is done through OpenID Connect. or WS Federation, which are different standards from a security integration point of view. So these are industry standard protocols that are not specific to extranet user manager, and any application that supports them, which all the major vendors do, is able to leverage that from a single sign-on point of view. Multi-factor authentication, so if there's fairly high security requirements of the content that you're going to be publishing in your extranet, maybe an email and password is not sufficient, you want to do a second factor of authentication as part of that. So what happens is once they successfully log in, we go through a rules engine that says, should we do a second factor of authentication? You know, did they fail a previous password attempt? Did they do a forgotten password reset? Are they coming from a new IP or a new country, a new device we haven't seen before? You know, those are all potential triggers to say, you know what, just the password's not enough. We need to do a phone call or a text message to that person. They need to confirm that before we let them into the portal from there. So just providing that additional layer of security in there. Delegation idea I already mentioned. I really want to stress that, though it's very important to the product. The idea that management of the extranet users needs to be delegated to the business. You know, IT doesn't want to manage the accounts. Business doesn't want IT to be a gatekeeper in there. You can even delegate it out to the external organizations themselves. If you don't do this, people will just go around it. They'll start using Dropbox or email sharing or other ways that you don't have control around to do that sort of external collaboration. So it's important you provide something that's useful, that puts the decision process into the people that are closest to making those decisions, which is right down with the business or with those external organizations. The product can be installed in your own environment. We just need an IIS server. It could be a SharePoint server or just a regular Microsoft server, or we can host it on your behalf in Azure. So we have a multi-tenant environment that we manage. We've got a third-party NOC providing 7/24 monitoring and remediation against that, and we manage that whole environment for you. The product is multilingual. Being a Canadian firm, we started out with English and French. We've since had clients add in many other languages through there as well. So it's very easy to update the text and do the translations related to that. So how did the product price out? I mentioned the one price with Ontario MD from the hosted enterprise edition point of view. There's two different flavors to the product. In Ontario MD's case, they're not only coming into the website, but they're providing access into a number of applications that they've built themselves. So they're managed in a completely separate environment. They're not even Microsoft, they're a Java stack. From that point of view, that all hangs together and works well. So that's what requires them to have the Enterprise Edition, because they're going to more than one application. That's really the only difference from a licensing point of view between Standard and Enterprise. If you were just coming into, say, SharePoint, Standard would be more than sufficient from that perspective. And then you can either buy a perpetual license on-premise with a 20% annual software assurance fee, which also covers you for your test and dev environments, or we can provide a hosted, fully managed environment for you in our infrastructure, which is actually in the cloud in Azure. Okay, so let's actually dive into a deeper demo here. And caveat before we get going here, I've torn this demo apart over the last couple of weeks and haven't completely put it back together, but I think we've got enough to get a good story together here. And this is basically a reference project that we've used for quite a number of years here at Envision IT, kind of a place to keep our IP and the various different things we're doing from a SharePoint project point of view. So it's called the Envision Shakespeare Company, and it's modeled as a fictitious theater company. It's kind of like Contosa or AdventureWorks from a Microsoft point of view. We wanted to mix it up and make it a little bit different. It does have an adaptive design for PC, tablet, and mobile, so it uses Bootstrap to do that. And it's populated with the content of the complete works of Shakespeare. And that was part of the reason I chose this, was content is king or queen, depending on who you talk to. And it's really important to have a decent amount of content in there, because Shakespeare is open source now. He's been gone for 400 years or so now. The copyrights have expired. From that point of view, it allowed us to put a lot of content in from that point of view. Allowed us to do a lot of search rollups as part of that. SharePoint search is very rich when you've got a lot of content in there. Things like image renditions, rotators, galleries, videos are part of what we wanted to build in there as well. And the whole process for building the site out. It's all managed through PowerShell. We use metadata navigation, friendly URLs, the term store, it's all part of that. We actually publish it up as an open source project, not the one that I'm going to be showing you here. It's been a while since we've refreshed the public one, but we're likely going to do a new refresh of that in the future as well. So what does the site look like just from an information architecture point of view before we dive into the site itself? Well, I mentioned we've got the complete works of Shakespeare in there, and actually just as I'm looking at this, I left one of the boxes out, which is his poetry. He's not just a theater writer, he's got a large collection of poems as well. So that all falls into the bucket of his works. So each work can either be a piece of poetry or a play. Each play can be broken down into acts, and acts can be broken down into scenes. So there's actually a rich hierarchy to the metadata and the structure of the content in there. Each work can have a production. So if you think about Hamlet as being one of his works, you could say, well, there's the 2017 production of Hamlet with a particular director and interpretation that he may be doing off of that. And then there's individual performances of that production, say through that year. So that is the whole hierarchy on the left-hand side. And then we've got news and media from a general hierarchy on the right-hand side of things. So let's actually jump into the site itself. Now it is publicly available, so you can hit it yourself. If you go to shakespearedev.envisionator.com, you'll come to this site here. We've got the branding, we've got the bootstrap navigation in here, we've got the content through the whole experience here. So if we look at the structure of the site for a minute here, let me just come down into our admin page. So one of the things we like to do when we're building any sort of site, whether it's an intranet or a public-facing site in SharePoint, is build a page that's easy spot for the content authors to come into, to say, where are the links to the things that I care about as a content author? You know, where do I upload my images, my documents, my pages? What are the different types of pages that I have? What are the other things that I can do related to administering this site? So if I come down, say, to scenes, I can see here, you know, we've got several hundred scenes across all the different plays that Shakespeare wrote, at least the ones that we know about. There's debate as to whether there's other ones out there as well. And they're broken down based on a hierarchy. So we have a term store tag here that says what's the particular work that this scene applies to, and what's the act and scene number according to that. So we can organize all the content in here, and then if we want to do roll-ups to say, well, I want to have a roll-up play that shows all of the scenes from All's Well That Ends Well, it's very easy to do a search query against this and say, well, give me everything where the work equals All's Well That Ends Well. And it allows us that ability to build those sort of rich roll-ups through there. We've got similar content types and metadata for plays, for productions, for the news and the media as well. So I can come into, say, the news. I can see the roll-up images, the content and such that we've got through here. So if I open up one of these news articles, you know, let's say I want to actually author this article, I can click on the edit button here, and the full CMS opens up. I have the ability to edit the content. We can see we've got a little typo in there. Let me get rid of that question mark. Maybe we need some breaks in there. It's a pretty long paragraph. You know, we shouldn't use things like click here as hyperlinks, so we'll have to fix that up. You know, that's an accessibility issue. So all these sorts of things, as a content author, I can go through as I'm working through the content in here. I can save this page, so I've now saved my changes, but the page is still checked out to me. So I don't have the ability for anybody else to see this. Nobody else can work on it while I've got it checked out. I can then say, okay, well, I'm finished working on it. I can check this particular page in, and it's now available for everybody else to see. Now the page itself keeps a whole history of everything that's happened through there. So if I come into my page history and look at my version history, for example, here, I can actually see the edits that were made there, you know, and I'm currently at version 2.1, last modified by me at this date and time. So I can see the full history of what's happening with that page. Now, SharePoint has this concept of version history and major and minor versions through there. So if I come back here for a second, let me go back to my page itself. And if I want to go to my library settings, there's a couple things I want to go over in here. So in my versioning settings, what I've done is left major and minor versions on in here. And from a draft item security, I've said only users who can edit items see the draft items. What this means is right now I'm in this version 2.1 version. Any other content author can see those changes that I've made and checked in. But anybody who's anonymously hitting the site that doesn't have edit rights is only going to see the approved items. So they're going to see the version 2.0 version that's approved and available. They're not going to see my edits through there. Now there's a couple of other things I can do in here as well. Right now I've left the site to require content approval off. I can turn that on, and that's going to require somebody who's approver, can be a different person than who has edit rights, to sign off on this item, to say, yes, this is approved. And often what we do when we turn on that version approval is we also set up a workflow. So I can come into the workflow settings here and say, you know what, I want to add a workflow in. And there's a standard publishing approval workflow that works well for this to say, okay, I want to just set up approvals, and I want to start this workflow. Oh, I have to turn on the content approval. We'll leave that for now. I'm not going to actually turn all this on. But basically, I set this workflow to approve the publishing of a major version of an item. So before somebody can publish it, it triggers this workflow. The approver has to sign off on it. That could be a multi-step process if you've got multiple approvers, and then the content gets approved and published out through there. So let's come back to our item now. Let me just refresh this. I've done a lot of changes here. And come to my Publish tab. Now right now I just see a Publish button. If I turned on the workflow approvals, I wouldn't actually have the ability to publish. I would have a button that says Submit for Approval. And I can come back and see the approval status and what's happening with those tasks and who are we waiting for to approve that. I'm going to do the quick and dirty though and just hit the Publish button, and away it goes from there. Now, one of the other things I want to bring up here is right now we're seeing the SharePoint URLs. I'm in the /pages library. If you've done any publishing work with SharePoint, you're familiar with this kind of URL design. But if I want to make this a public-facing site, it's important for me to have proper URLs in there. So I can actually set up friendly URLs, which I've already done on this page here, that give us a nice hierarchy. There's no .aspx, there's no pages on there. This is all done through the term store. In fact, when I create a new article, so let's say I come in here and say I just want to add a page. Now, I'm already down in the news area, so what SharePoint will assume is I want to create another news article, because that's where I am. So when I hit add a page in here, let's just call it webinar demo. Go ahead and create it. And I can come in here and decide what style of page that I want to have. So I can come to my page layout and say, you know what, I was creating news articles, so I should really use the news layout for that. So it has a specific layout, content type, metadata associated with that, and I can put my content in. Now I've got a Word doc here. Let me just pull it up with some content that I'm just going to paste in. One of the nice things with SharePoint 2013 and forward is when you've got content in Word that you want to put into SharePoint. It used to be we tell people never ever to paste. Now it actually pastes quite nicely. If we look at the source for that page, it's actually done a nice job of turning that into proper rich HTML. Left a page break there, I just took that out. And there's our content ready to go. Now let's say I wanted to actually reference a document that I'm going to upload through here as well. How would I go ahead and do that? Well, let's start by coming back here. Let's go to our site contents. And we have a documents library. It doesn't currently have anything in it. So what I'm going to do is pull up my Windows Explorer. Another nice thing with SharePoint is I can just grab a document. So this is actually a PDF version of the presentation that we're going through today. And I'm just going to drag it onto my SharePoint window, and it will upload that document up in. Now I should have given you background. We're actually running SharePoint 2016 for this demo that we're doing right now. All the same things that I'm doing apply from a SharePoint Online point of view as well. So there I've got my new document. I can click on it, make sure it comes up okay. That looks good. Grab the URL for it, and let's come back to that new article that we're creating. So we'll just put in PowerPoint presentation there and say, well, I want to insert a link from an address. I'm going to use that address that I just copied from the document that I had, and I can go ahead and save this. And I can decide whether this opens in a new window or whether it just launches directly from here. I've left it to launch directly. Yep, that looks right. It's got the presentation on it. Okay, so I've done all these things in SharePoint. Actually, let me do one more thing, which is actually mark this particular page as published. What we want to do now is demonstrate how that works from an Azure point of view, because ultimately we're not going to bring people into SharePoint, we're going to bring them into an Azure website, and we're using SharePoint just to author the content related to that. So if we remember back to the infographic that I showed you from an Ontario ND point of view, this is a similar one for what we're doing here, where we've been doing this authoring work right now on the SharePoint side. What we want to do now is push that content over to the Azure website. So let me bring up that site first, just to have a look at that. So we've got a number of different pages here, hang on. So it's actually called shakespeare.umdemo.com. And it is an SSL site, as every site should be these days. And there we go. Now we don't have a lot of content in here. We haven't really wired up the nav properly just yet. But what I want to demonstrate is bringing that content across and what's involved in doing that. So typically what we do is we have a scheduled job that's running to pick up any changes and move them across. And we schedule it, say, every 5 minutes, every 10 minutes, whatever sort of frequency, because the job itself doesn't take very long to run. If nothing's changed, it takes sort of less than a minute to go through there. I'm going to manually fire it off because I want to kind of show you the backside process of what's happening here. And basically what it's doing is it's saying, oh, I found a new file here, this webinar.pdf. So that's the PDF document that we uploaded in the documents library. So it's now pushed that document up into the Azure site. That was the only thing that changed from a document or an image point of view. So now it's skipped along and says, okay, I need to build the friendly URLs. I'm building out some navigation code, and then I'm going to look for new pages that I need to push up. We should see two new pages come through as part of this process. There was the one that I'd fixed the typos for, and then there's the the net new one that we just created. So now it's starting to work on the pages. So again, it's looking for differences. There's close to 1,000 pages in the site, so there's quite a number of different pages. But it looks and says, okay, what ones have actually changed? Well, that cast list one was the one that we edited. And then we've got the webinar demo one that we created. So it's uploaded that. It needs to do some things about rollups and such that we'll talk about. And basically we're done from there. So it took about a minute to go through that process. So let's come back to our site. And let's start with, our webinar demo page. So if we take this URL here and say, okay, we were going to webinar demo. Let's just paste it on here. And boom, we can see that content that we just pasted in and published has now appeared on the Azure website. And that PowerPoint presentation that I uploaded, the link still works exactly the same because the relative paths are the same between the two sites. I can click on that link, and it's not loading it from SharePoint, it's loading it from that Azure website here at shakespeare.umdemo.com. So we've taken web content, images, documents, publish them through SharePoint, and they just magically appear on the Azure website side of things. So it's a great way to provide either public-facing content or secure content. So let's kind of go through, that's how we get the content there. How do we then manage the users that need to come in and have a look at that content? So if we come back here for a minute, and what I'm going to do is start from the admin console side of extranet user manager. So if we do a quick tour through here, we've got the ability to add and edit users and groups. We can configure the system as a whole. What I want to do before I do most of my demos is to do a quick check and make sure, okay, what users have I used previously, because I create a lot of demo users through this. And then we'll go through the process of registering a new demo user. So if I just do a search there, whoops, I hit print by accident. And looks like P. Carson 7 was the last one that I used through here. Okay, so let me open up an incognito window now because I want this user to be the net new user who's registering on the site. So if I go to the login v4 landing register URL, in fact, if you're curious, let me chat this out to the group as a whole. You can actually hit this URL as well yourself. So I'll go ahead and type that in. If you want, click on it. You can go through the registration. You need to provide a first and last name and an email address. So I said 7 was my last one. I'll make this one 8. We do have a CAPTCHA set up in here. It gets a little annoying sometimes. We'll see how many tries it takes for me to figure out, in this case, street signs. Okay. No, wants at least 2. Oh, come on. Google's getting a little annoying here. There we go. That was a longer one. And I can go ahead and register. So I'm a net new user that wants to come into the extranet site. I've found the site, I've seen the public content on there, I've hit the register link, and I've come in here and done my registration. So success, great. I'm going to get a confirmation email and then a second email once my account is approved. So we've actually set this one up for approval processes. But let's come back and let's actually just re-execute that search. And we can see now that we've got Peter Carson 8 pending approval in there. That's the account that I just created. Now emails do come through for this. It takes a little while sometimes for the emails to show up. No, they just pop through. So here's the first one to me as the person who registered saying thanks for requesting an account. And then here's the one to me as the approver saying, hey, Peter Carson 8 just registered. You need to edit their record. So I can just click the link in the email. Takes me into our admin tool and I can see all the details of that person that registered on the site. So I need to make a decision. Do I want to approve this person? If so, then I need to set them to be active. I need to decide what groups I'm going to put them into, which ultimately will decide what rights they have. So I'm going to put them in this EUM demo group. And other than that, I should just be able to hit update. And that will create the user account. So what's going to happen now is it's going to send a welcome email out to that user that just registered to say, hey, welcome to the extranet. You need to set your credentials so you can now log into the new site. So again, we just need to wait for a minute for that email to come through, and then we'll be able to go that login process. Actually, while we're waiting for that email, let me come back to my incognito window here. I'm just going to take you to a couple of other spots. Here's one for OCAS. This is a nice example of a semi-automated approval process around registration. So when you go to ocas.sharepoint.com, which is an Office 365 site, it redirects here to say, hey, you need to log in. If you don't have an account, you need to register. So we click the register link. So it does have an anonymous self-registration. The key here, though, is that if I choose an organization, like let's say the Children's Aid Society of Toronto, because most of the users that are coming into this site work for one of the 50+ member children's aid societies across the province of Ontario. So if I do that and I enter an email address that matches that organization, so the email domain matches, then we say, oh, you must work for them, you're auto-approved. You still need to prove that you own that email address because you have to receive that email, click the link, set your password, and come in. So it does do a validation, but it doesn't require anybody at OCAS to do a verification of that registration, which is nice. Okay, so here's my link that came through saying, hey, welcome to the extranet. Again, the copy for these emails is all fully customizable as well. The key thing here is that it wants me to set a password. So I'm going to copy that hyperlink because I don't want it to open in my default browser. I'm going to open it up in my incognito one here because that's who the external user is. And we see here we now need to set a password. Now we've set some rules to say, okay, it does have complexity turned on. We're debating. I think we're going to recommend to our clients that we turn that off. Current thinking is that that doesn't actually make sense or make things more secure. What's more important is the length and whether that password is a previously compromised or easily guessed kind of password. So we're going to update how this works. But for now, let's go through. And you can see it's giving me some guidance as I'm typing. It needs to begin with a letter or a number. Okay, I've done that, but I've still got to satisfy the other three things in there. Okay, so now I've satisfied 3 of them. The only thing I need to do now is make sure that my passwords match. So I type in the same password here. Boom, we're green all the way across. Set my password, and I'm good. So now if I come back to my home, imagine for a minute that we're logging into the site. I'm going to do it all in the EUM portal, but this could be any site that I'm signing into. It's going to present a login form to me. So I'm not actually logged in yet. All I've done so far is set my password. So I need to use that same pcarson8 account that I just created and that same password that I just set and go ahead and log in. Now, since this is the first time I'm logging in, we have the option of displaying a disclaimer as well to say, okay, there's some terms and conditions that you need to accept to before we go into the site. And now I'm logged into the site. So I can come in here and say I want to update my profile. So all the information that I entered on registration is displayed here. We can present different fields. We could lock down things like the email address if we didn't want them to change it. That's certainly available as part of that. I can also change my password. So if I know my old password, but I'm not comfortable with it anymore, I can update it to a new password through here. And likewise on the sign-in process, I can do the forgotten password if I've forgotten my credentials through there. So that's a quick tour through how things hang together from that point of view. So if we come back to our deck for a minute, actually I think we're pretty much through that side too. So what I'd like to do now is just spend a little bit more time back on this side here. So we looked at the user side of things. We searched users, we edited users, we approved them through here. We have a similar ability to do things with groups as well. So I can do a search here, and I can say, okay, well, there's that EUM demo group that we made that user a member of. I can actually click into that, and I can see who all the members are for that group. I can actually make somebody an owner of that group as well. So if I wanted to say, you know what, that new user that I just created, I actually want to make them an owner so that they can manage the membership themselves, I just go ahead and add owner through here, and they then have the ability to do that. So that's the whole idea around the delegation. And when they come into this portal here, if all they were was a group owner, the only thing they would see is the ability to add and search users. They wouldn't see the ability to edit groups or to set the system settings as a whole. So the application security trims back depending on what you're allowed to do through there. I'm logged in as a configuration editor, so I can do things like I want to go into my email configuration, and let's have a look at that welcome email that we got, and I actually want to update the copy for that. So you can see here, I can apply my own content styling. I can even get into the HTML source if I want to. I can insert in tokens for things like the display name, the set of password, the token expiry, all as part of that. So it's very flexible in terms of configuring all the different types of emails that can come out through the system. So that's a quick tour around on this side here. Okay, so let's finish up back on the deck here. So we went through how this publishing process works, how both anonymous and authenticated users can come into that Azure website. We didn't touch on the Azure search side. We can leave that for a future session, but we leverage the Azure search stack to provide a rich search experience on those sites as well, because we don't have the SharePoint search available to us when we're in the Azure website. So I mentioned cost-wise, there was some significant differences between running full SharePoint versus doing this Azure website sort of hybrid approach. And we've had a number of clients that have set up a full SharePoint in Azure. And basically, there's more variations of this, but I wanted to illustrate sort of two common scenarios. One being we need a full, highly available environment, which means we need 8 servers, 2 web front ends, 2 app servers, 2 SQL servers, and 2 domain controllers to run that environment. So you're going to be paying about 36 grand in license fees for primarily the SharePoint server licenses, and then about 4 grand a month in monthly Azure VM hosting costs. So it's pretty significant dollars that we're talking about. You could scale that back and say, okay, we're only going to do half the number of servers, so we don't need the more expensive SQL Enterprise to do that, and we're going to save a lot on our monthly costs because we're only doing half the servers. So pretty much divide all of those costs by 2. But you're still looking at 2 grand a month and 18 grand up front to do that. Versus saying, well, let's put that into an Azure website. What does that look like? Well, in the Ontario MD case, it's this scenario here where we're doing $427 a month for that highly available 2-server S2 plan. You really want to do highly available because Microsoft doesn't guarantee a service level agreement unless you have a highly available farm. So you could scale down to a smaller server like an S1. I wouldn't recommend scaling all the way down to the $100 a month. So sort of your baseline is probably about $200 a month for your environment. There are shared and free instances you can do as well. There is some limitations in terms of things that you can do in there. I found the S1 plan is sort of a good baseline to use from that point of view. So what I thought I'd do here is just take you through a quick tour on the Azure side. So let me actually sign into our Azure portal. So websites are considered app services. There's a number of different types of app services, but we can see here is our Azure Shakespeare website prod. This is the one that we've been using for our demonstrations here. So I can actually see what's been happening, what sort of data in and out, number of requests, average response time against the site. One of the nice things about this style of of sites is the response time tends to be extremely good. As you navigate around through the Ontario MD site, let me go back there for a second here. Let me just stay on the public side for a second. Let's say I come into overview. I mean, we're seeing sort of well under second page response times from that point of view. So it's very quick to bring up the pages because most of the work has already happened. All the rollups have been pre-calculated at publishing time. There's not a lot of server-side or client-side work that needs to happen to render these pages out. So performance tends to be extremely quick from that point of view. We can see from an application settings and a scale up, scale down point of view. So I have the ability through the portal here to say, you know what, I want to use a different tier. Right now I'm on an S1 standard. I could bump that up to an S2, S3, which is basically adding more cores and more RAM to that. And we can see here we've got our basic and our free and our shared as well that we could use as part of that too. I mean, you do get things like SSL support, which you're probably going to want from a basic level point of view, so you could run at that level there. You don't get SSL on the free or the shared, so you wouldn't want to use one of those. You can even go up to a premium where you've got a much higher dedication and availability as part of that. And we can also scale out, so scale up is increasing the size of the servers or bringing them back down. The scale out is simply how many instances of those do you have. So right now we're not running this because it's demo highly available. We just have a single instance through there. We can even turn on auto scale, which says, you know what, as your site traffic starts to go up, scale it up. And as the traffic comes down, scale it back down again. So if you've got unpredictable peaks and valleys in there, you can actually let Azure manage that for you. We can see that we've got our custom domains. So our shakespeare.umdemo.com that we've been hitting the site with is a domain that we own, and we've assigned it to Azure as part of that. Likewise, there's an SSL certificate associated with that. That's a GoDaddy certificate that we've purchased, we manage, we own, and we've uploaded it up into Azure to provide the SSL through there. One of the other things that is interesting that we do in the app services is this concept called web jobs. Now, we haven't set any up for Shakespeare, but this is basically how we manage the publishing process. So think about that console job that I ran that did the publishing. Rather than running it on my computer, I can actually upload the whole program up into Azure, set up a schedule in here and say every 5 minutes, run this web job to go do that publishing. So I don't need any infrastructure to run that service. And it actually doesn't consume any additional Azure costs. It's leveraging the servers that are already in place to run your website to run those web jobs as well. So a couple of the quick tips and things to think about from an Azure website's point of view. So from there, we've got a couple links in here. I'm going to update this deck slightly after the call. I realized I didn't put in the various different Shakespeare links, which are live and available on there. I want to make sure people have access to those as well. And I also want to let people know about some of our upcoming events. We've got SharePoint Fest coming up in a couple weeks. I'm going to be down in Chicago, December 7th, 8th, and also down in Washington, D.C., doing a SharePoint Fest in March, the latter part of the month there. Actually, I'm going to be delivering not only sessions during the conference, but a full day workshop in advance that's going to go deep into a lot of the topics we talked about here and in the prior webinars as part of this trilogy. Of course, we've got our extranet user manager topics. Our next webinar that we've just put up on the site is for January 16th after the holiday break. This is an interesting one. It's all about sharing your Office 365 securely with Google, Facebook, and Twitter users. Today, out of the box with Microsoft and Office 365, you can only share with other Office 365 users or people that have Microsoft accounts or Azure AD accounts. And what we're going to show you is how we can layer that on, take control of that login experience, and actually allow you to federate with Google, Facebook, Twitter, as well as the standard Microsoft offerings. And that's not just for Office 365. The scenarios that I've taken you through here today, like the Ontario MD website, the Shakespeare website that I was showing you, we can do that same integration there to say, you know what, if you've got users that are coming into your site and they don't want to remember their credentials, they want to just be able to sign in with their Google account or with their Facebook account, we're going to fully support that. And all the same things around approvals and self-registration and how that all gets managed all still apply. So you get all the benefits of Extranet User Manager and the governance around managing those external users with an even more streamlined end user experience in terms of how they onboard to the system. So we're about 5 minutes ahead. I'm going to give you an early lunch break start. And thank you very much for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed the webinar. If you've got any questions, either myself or Logan, who was on the call as well, be happy to follow up with that for you. As I mentioned, we're going to be uploading the deck and providing a follow-on email shortly from there. Thanks very much and have a great day.